Well, thank you very much for inviting me to speak before you today. I'm here to talk about my relationship with wood fire cooking and some of the techniques we use. So I'm the head chef and co-owner of Brat restaurant in Shoreditch, London, where everything is cooked and kind of expressed over fire. It's kind of been a fairly long journey getting here. Over the last 8 to 9 years, I've just kind of focused on wood fire cooking. Obviously, in a London restaurant, it's quite hard to do wood-fired cooking because you have regulations and lots of small spaces. So I was lucky enough to do a pop-up in Hackney in a railway arch called Climpton's Arch in about 2012. So I ran a pop-up of wood-fired cooking. And then I went to run a small restaurant in Shepherd's Market called Kitty Fisher's, as you said. And that was quite a challenge because it was a listed Georgian building. So we had a small grill in there. And we try to use the grill as much as possible, but I was always keen to kind of do my own thing, which was a combination of the kind of railway arch idea crossed with the restaurant in Kitty Fisher's. So why did we open Brat? It's a wood grill and wine bar. And to kind of put it simply, I visited a small fishing village in the Basque country called Guettaria. And there I kind of enjoyed this kind of whole turbot. It's their kind of iconic dish. And I ate there sitting outside, and I just thought like this kind of ticked all the boxes of what I love in restaurants. So I thought, how do we capture this experience in a central London restaurant? And why do we love it? So the atmosphere was very important. The kind of craftsmanship, the passion, the interaction between the front of house and kitchen and guest. There's a familiarity, there's a warmth and generosity coming from the kind of family-run restaurant it was. There's an openness to the kitchen. Obviously, the ingredients were super important as well. You know, their kind of restaurant was really inspired by the simple motto of buy well and don't ruin it, which is kind of quite a strong motto that sticks in my head a lot. They respect the tradition and the heritage of their area. They respect the supply chain and follow it. And they use kind of minimal menu descriptions, so it's really ingredient-led, and which is leads to kind of a simple form of cooking, just one ingredient well. I'm kind of drawn to the communal feel of a fire in a restaurant, and in general, really. The communal atmosphere of eating is something that we want to encourage at Brat. So we have this kind of, as you come into the restaurant, there's a big fire, and it's kind of, there's no back of house, front of house separation. You can kind of wander into the kitchen and have a look, and this was something which I was really keen on keeping. We kind of went for long tables, as you can see here, where people sit side by side next to the party along. And in the restaurants I go to in Spain and Portugal, for instance, you kind of end up overspilling into the next table, and I kind of like the energy that this brings to the room. And if you're at one of these tables, you kind of feel like you're at a bigger meal here. It's about keeping all those elements that I like and making them feasible again in a London restaurant, which was quite a balancing act, really. So Brat is based on a kind of, like a first floor site. So you have to kind of go up this door here, and you kind of come up to this big light room. But I was very keen on keeping that kind of, when you come up, it's quite a warm feeling. So having a fire there when you walk in adds to this kind of, I suppose, kind of multi-sensory experience. It kind of adds a dynamic feel to the room. So when you walk in, your sight is there. You can see the flames, and there's something quite comforting about this. You can also kind of hear the noise of the fire, the wood burning and the charcoal kind of flickering. And also, obviously, you can smell the smoke and the wood burning and the food interacting with the fire. And also, hopefully you can taste it in your food as well. There's a kind of unique flavor that comes from the charcoal. And you can touch it in a sense because you feel the heat. And this is also very important for the guests to make them feel comfortable, and also for the chef, because feeling the heat and using that kind of instinctive method of cooking is quite unique to wood-fired cooking. So this is the setup here. You can see it's quite a rustic setup. This was something which we built on site. There is a lot of obviously good companies that build grills out there, but we were very keen on keeping this kind of homemade DIY feel to it, again reflecting those grills we see in the Basque Country. Okay, so to my inspiration and influences with the dishes and cooking. So after eating the turbot, this main dish that is very iconic of the Basque Country, we were kind of, again, like I said, determined to recreate this experience. We actually named the restaurant after this dish, in a way. So the restaurant is called Brat, which is a old kind of slang word for turbot, used in kind of Old English language in the Northumberland area. So, you know, obviously it's got a double meaning, and obviously Brat's associated with another meaning. And in fact, it means apron in Welsh. So there's a few meanings there, but mainly it's named after this fish. And their kind of fish cooking methods was very different to what I was used to. You know, they use a kind of slow cooking method where they roast the fish as opposed to kind of grilling it hard. You know, and it's not that smoky char grill. As you can see, we cook it's kind of glistening and kind of has that, you don't see kind of bar marks on there, which is something I was really interested in. So the Basque Country and the Basque culture really resonated with me. There was a sense of kind of community based around the restaurants and the way they serve their dishes. I grew up on Anglesey in North Wales, next to the sea. So, I guess that went into the kind of relationship I have with the Basque Country. There's that kind of strong Celtic connection there. These are some grills which we were inspired from in Getteria. So this is the village, the beautiful village of Getteria. It's a very small town. You know, it kind of has similarities to some of the nice places in Cornwall where most of our fish comes from as well. And also all our food is really inspired by this area, where they kind of cook whole fish on the grill, whole birds, kind of whole chops, and they put it in the middle of the table for everyone to kind of tuck in. I also found myself kind of relating to the terroir of the region again. And, you know, the Basque Country has their own identity, really. They have their own language, very similar to the Welsh in that respect. So I guess, there's cooking that I'm inspired by, but there's also the culture that I feel quite connected to. You know, something which I kind of realized as well, that the fishermen were really the heirs to the kind of food culture that was centuries old, really. And where then, as now, like the freshly caught fish was the main ingredient in the diet of the fishermen, and grilling was the easiest and simplest way to do this. Also, in this small town of Getteria, if you've been there, you'll kind of know, but when you're walking around the streets, each house has a small grill kind of stuck to the outside of it, and which is quite special. They have special guidelines that permit this. And this encourages all the fishermen and other locals just to get their catch and just cook it on their little fire outside. And that's basically how the town has operated for years. Another connection that I have to another part of the world, this is Patagonia in Argentina. Again, this is another Welsh connection. Their main language in Patagonia is Welsh, which is the only place outside of Wales that speak Welsh. Coincidentally, their style of cooking is always over fire as well. It's their main thing. So that allowed me to explore that culture a lot more. And I would say a little bit more depth because of the language, similarities. And so this is a picture of one of the chefs that's inspired me a lot. This is Francis Malman, which he's quite a famous grill chef. But those kind of rustic approach was something that really struck a chord with me. So going back to Getteria, northern Spain. So why do they cook over charcoal in this village? Well, it's quite simple in a way. It's the explorers used to leave Getteria via the Bay of Biscay, and they carried on board charcoal with them. So this is a picture of Juan Elcano, who was a very famous explorer, went around the world, and he's very iconic in Getteria. So when they were on board these boats, they used to have these metal boxes with a bed of sand, and then they used to kind of light the charcoal on there and then kind of cook what they caught at sea. So obviously charcoal is better than wood to carry because you need kind of less of it to obtain a good fire. It's kind of dehydrated and mineralized product, which is obviously better suited to a damp environment. So the Basque charcoal grilling really comes from a seafaring legacy. And kind of over the years, They perfected this method out at sea and like experimented with different kinds of fish. And that technique kind of eventually made its way inland, which I find quite interesting there. So how do we source our wood and charcoal here? So we kind of carefully select wood by researching, which variety complements the produce we're cooking and the kind of heat we require. So we experimented with lemon and almond groves from Spain, the vineyards of kind of parts of Europe, and also hand picking from orchards in the UK. And in the summer, just before opening Brat, I kind of held a series of dinners at the Royal Academy, in the courtyard of the Royal Academy, just testing out different woods and different kinds of flavours from them, which was quite interesting because I don't think anyone's really cooked with live fire in the Royal Academy courtyard before, and I was slightly worried considering all the expensive art that's inside there. So this is how they make the charcoal here, okay? So it's very important that you know the ingredients of your fire. It's obviously just as important to know that as the produce that you're cooking on the grill. And we're kind of lucky to use brilliant suppliers, our main one being a London log company, which is based in South London and run by Mark Parr. So he and a few other companies have really facilitated the kind of consistent delivery of wood and charcoal to London chefs over the past 8 to 9 years. And this, to me, really was the key in growth of the wood-fire cooking scene as such amongst chefs. Obviously, as you can imagine, storage of wood is very tricky in small London restaurants. So it's really key that we have this kind of constant supply of very good charcoal. And the way we kind of build up our fires is through 3 different heat sources as such. So it's at the beginning, this is a kind of briquette, it's called. So the charcoal suppliers will have all these available, and I feel like it's essential to find the right blend to kind of create your fire. So this is a briquette, and they're based on Japanese Ogaton charcoal. And this particular brand is called Magix, and it's made from 100% recovered wood byproduct with no additives or fillers or anything like that. It's fired like regular charcoal. And the kind of only mechanized part of this is when they shape the bars. You can see it's kind of like long and hollow there. They kind of create this kind of sweet lilac color with like a mauve gas ring around the edge. And this really creates the baseline for which you kind of creates a bed underneath putting the charcoal on top. And this is probably more identifiable. This is the kind of charcoal. This is like lump hardwood charcoal. So once you've got the kind of magic briquettes creating the heat at the bottom, you kind of gently add a layer of this charcoal on top. This is for a nice glowing heat and flavor, which is very important against the style of grilling we do, because we don't really look for that incredibly hot char. We kind of want that kind of glowing, roasted effect from the charcoal. And then finally, we kind of season the fire with wood. So it's kind of, all the different woods taste different. They have different burning products. And so when you've got that nice fire, you kind of dot round different pieces of wood over the charcoal. So it creates smoke. If you want some flame over here, you can kind of do that. And I feel like it's, you're kind of seasoning what you're doing. We use mainly birch and oak. So birch is mainly for flame and kind of a quick fire. And oak is for more sustained heat and kind of gentle smoke to come from that. So in service, we have no gas or electricity in the kitchen. We don't cook over any of this, just fire. And the kind of oven is set up in 3 ways. So we have a wood-fired oven, which has just wood inside with oak. We have a grill range, which is a kind of a fairly traditional setup with the bars where we cook our beef on. And then we have these kind of hobs, which are inspired by the Kamado pits from Japan. And the company we use is called a Joy Stove, and they're kind of hidden under the hob parts of the range, which you'll see in a minute. And they're kind of 4 individual cast aluminium stoves. They're kind of very versatile and do 2 things. So they hold the heat and are amazingly controllable and economical. So we also use these pits to kind of imitate kind of wok-style cooking. So in these small pits, it's quite intense heat. So we get sieves, and then we kind of put vegetables inside the sieve and kind of toss it around. in that kind of wok style, very quick cooking. So we're always thinking about wood and fire pairings. You kind of the obvious classics like kind of oak with salmon or any kind of oily fish, pork with applewood, beef and oak, sweet chestnut with kind of crustaceans, or kind of pear or fruit wood with kind of cauliflower or other more kind of structured vegetables. So I'm just going to run you through a few dishes we do. So this is the kind of wood-fired bread that comes from the wood oven with some anchovies there. So that's how we cook it. It's basically kind of a pizza oven in kind of essence, really. We bake our whole loaves in the wood oven as well. So I kind of like that kind of burnt top that you get from the wood fire. And this is kind of, I guess, one of the kind of our signature dishes. So this is a burnt cheesecake. So this is cooked in the wood-fired oven as well. It kind of souffles very high and then kind of collapses down a bit. But as you can see, it's kind of charred on top. So you have kind of a creaminess in the middle and then kind of a bitterness from the char, which also creates that lovely juxtaposition, which is something I was always looking for. Here we have some oysters that we cook in kind of cast iron pots. Again, so the oysters are put in the pot over seaweed, lid on, and then in the wood-fired oven. And this is kind of another way you can use the wood-fired oven. So there's not direct heat hitting it, but it kind of creates a steam inside the pot and then kind of lightly poaches the oysters inside. We use some roast some potatoes in there as well, and a kind of crab straight on the grill. So they're cooked whole over the fire. Again, this is a very Basque technique, is to cook everything whole. So it's cooked whole over the fire, and then we break it down after it, and then make the sauce out of the head meat, and then serve it like this. It's a very kind of Basque technique here. This is another technique, which is more Patagonian. So I was talking about the kind of Francis Malman influence from South America. This is sea trout cooked over cedar planks. The cedar planks act here to kind of protect the fish from the fire, but also to gently smoke it at the same time. So you can kind of have that kind of comfy mouthfeel in the fish, which I think is a lovely way of cooking oily fish. So this is kind of our kind of iconic Brat dish. So this is the turbot cooked over fire. So we created these cages here, which kind of helps hold the turbot. And as you can see, it's quite far off the fire here, and it just kind of gently cooks like this. And as it's cooking, we kind of spray it with a vinegar. So it's a similar kind of method to basting in a pan with butter, but we kind of spray it with a vinegar. So it's constantly sprayed and turned over and over. It takes about 40 minutes for a whole turbot to cook. But you really want to get that kind of gelatin working. And I guess you kind of compare it to a slow-cooked pork belly or slow-cooked lamb shoulder or something. You want to kind of really work that kind of collagen to turn into gelatin and then create the sauce that you eat with it. So here's one of the chefs spraying one of our mini turbots there. Everyone's kind of used to cooking fish and meats, I think, over fire, but I think my revelations were when I was experimenting back in Clemson's Arch in 2012, 2013, was when I started cooking with fruit and vegetables and kind of, say, like leeks and things over the fire. This was really interesting for me. So I got, say, for instance, strawberries and placed them over the fire. So this intense smoky heat kind of created the kind of jammy effect on the strawberry. So you're getting kind of all that great quality of a strawberry in one cooking method, which I thought was very interesting. And this is something we do at the restaurant. We kind of cook a lot of vegetables and fruits over the fire. So we have a few other restaurants here. So my business partner and co-owner of Brat also has a restaurant called Kiln in central London, which is a Thai restaurant. It's all over fire as well. Ben is very inspired by charcoal cooking as well, and these dishes are inspired by rural Thailand. And in rural Thailand, they use a lot of charcoal cooking because of the how far they are away from the cities. So Ben really has taken this approach and put it in a central London restaurant, which I think is pretty amazing. You also have this restaurant in Singapore, which is called Burnt Ends, which is probably one of the leading grill restaurants in the world. And funny enough, so Dave, who opened this restaurant, used to do a pop-up in Hackney, in the same place as me, where he experimented with everything, and then I took over after him. So this kind of railway arch in Hackney kind of gave rise to 2 grill restaurants, which I find quite interesting. And this is El Cano, the restaurant we've spoken about, and this is another Basque restaurant called Parry, which is now number 6 in the world's top 50, which is solely everything cooked over fire, no electricity, no gas. That just kind of really shows the way that wood-fired cooking has become very refined, and it's hitting some really high levels right now. And another example of a restaurant that I love and work closely with actually is Eksted in Sweden. Again, no gas or electricity. It has a Michelin star. Again, it's slightly refined but inspired by kind of the Swedish approach of wood-fired cooking. And here are the pictures of Nicholas, which is the head chef, cooking outdoors. But he uses a lot of birch wood in this restaurant, so it's a lot flamier than my cooking, but super interesting. And it's also that kind of idea that I had of taking something and putting it in a central, in a city restaurant. So this is a Swedish outdoor techniques, but in a central Stockholm restaurant, which is a tricky thing to do, but he's done it so well, and I find it very interesting. So, is our charcoal ethical and sustainable? Well, we use DEFRA-approved English charcoal made from coppice woodlands in Kent, using kind of age-old techniques to produce the charcoal, which kind of ends up in a very traceable system and is very sensitive to the local environment. Also, we're kind of one of the only few places that is lucky enough to use the glorious kind of home oak charcoal. I don't know if you saw a pile of wood earlier, that was the home oak charcoal being made from Spain. And the home oak acorns are the sweet, kind of an edible diet of the black Iberian pigs, which then go on to make jamon iberico. So everything is done with the land and environment in mind here, and the trees are only felled where absolutely necessary, let's say, mostly when they have a damage or they have disease. So in the process, as much of the charcoal is made from pollarding and coppicing the lower branches of the trees, which in turn kind of leads to higher acorn yield during the maiden year. So they've kind of created a system where hopefully both benefits each other here. And the charcoal is made on site using traditional techniques and little mechanical assistance. So the process is very fascinating and compelling and can kind of take up to 5 weeks from start to finish, with the wood being quite dense and hard to begin with. Kind of produces an incredibly hard charcoal, which is kind of rich, earthy, peaty notes to it. And it's a great, great product, which is kind of unsurprising given the kind of heritage and the pedigree of and care that goes into it. So just to conclude then, I enjoy the way the world and cultures have different relationships with wood-fired cooking. Whether it's the Basque country, Argentina, kind of US smoking barbecue, Japanese yakitori grills to kind of Turkish mangal style, or the Thai restaurant style, which you saw in the picture earlier. It's I love the diversity of dishes and traditions that have been formed around this kind of primitive and instinctive form of cooking, with many communities kind of around the world having different kind of wood-fired dishes that they feel very close to. I feel like it's slightly ironic how we've spent years trying to invent kind of new ways of cooking. So, sous vide, electric hob, gas stoves, etc. But then we're still fascinated and very connected to cooking over fire. I've experienced kind of many diverse approaches to the grill cooking, and I'm kind of glad that we're generally moving away from that slightly macho man with fire image that kind of, it's kind of been the scene for a while. I'm kind of glad that there's cultures such as the Basque who are celebrating the more delicate and gentle form of wood cooking here. I think the next step for us as a restaurant is improving the kind of sustainability aspect of this form of cooking. We're constantly questioning and challenging ourselves here. We're doing quite a lot to try and improve this, but we're trying to also think differently about our use of heat. For instance, can we use that excessive heat to kind of warm the restaurant? Or I would say kind of in an Aga style, so you're kind of warming your water with the excess heat, or kind of maybe warming the restaurant up. We're also constantly trying to double check or triple check the carbon footprint of our charcoal making, and we're constantly visiting suppliers. But this is something that is super important here. And it's, in order to kind of maintain this fantastic and beautiful form of cooking, it's very essential that we concentrate our efforts here so we can kind of keep on enjoying wood-fired cooking for many more years to come. Okay, thank you. Thanks for your time.